BKB are delighted to bring you their new podcast, More Than Just Numbers. Join Ali and Luke, along with guest speakers, whose aim is to help you navigate through your business journey. Business is more than just numbers, and at BKB, the team provide financial direction and leadership, so each episode will cover a different topic that will help you and your business grow. We hope you find this episode of value.
Right, so good morning and welcome to our next podcast in the series that we're producing from More Than Just Numbers. And this time we're going to be talking about the aftermath for recruitment. So thank you for coming along and listening to this. We are joined today by our guest speaker, Joy Bruce, and you're going to hear a little bit more about her shortly. Just to let you know a little bit of housekeeping, this is expected to take about 30 to 45 minutes, so we won't keep you too long. And we're aiming to covering the main topics that are going on in the world of recruitment as we see them at the moment. So just a little bit about BKB. Those of you with us probably know us already. There's myself and my business partner, Alistair. We're both fully qualified accountants and we're also chartered tax advisors. We've been trading now probably for about, just over 15 years, covering everything in the local area to do with accountancy and tax, all the fun things that you guys either do or don't want to be involved in. We deal with bookkeeping, accounts, tax returns and all that sort of stuff. And we're here to support our clients. So one of the main things we pride ourselves in is offering a service, because ultimately at the end of the day, we're big believers in accountancy being all about the service we provide. So anybody out there needing to have a chat with us about their accountancy needs, please feel free to get in touch with us. But we're not going to go too much about ourselves today. We're here to hear more about Joy and what she's got to offer. So I'm going to pass over to my business partner, Alistair, who's going to talk and introduce Joy for us.
Thank you, Luke, and hello, everybody. So they always say, don't they, that the biggest asset for a company is its staff. And one of the things that we've all seen recently is the challenges that Brexit and COVID have had with employees and working from home and the hybrid model. And certainly talking to all of our clients across all sectors, there seems to be certainly a lack of employees coming to the market to be able to employ. So we need to think about how companies position themselves. So we've invited Joy to come along and give us some tips. We've worked with Joy for 10 years now, and one of the things that I like about Joy is she always performs in a very professional manner. She took time out when we first met Joy to come and meet us and understand and speak to the team. And Joy's always very clearly understands what we are about and the culture that we want to put BKB to. And it helps us because Joy then, when she sees candidates, Joy spends a lot of time vetting the candidates before she puts them in front of us. So if she doesn't think that they're suitable, she'll basically push them to one side there, and Joy therefore has got a very high success rate, I should say, with putting candidates our way, and generally most people that she puts in front of us we end up employing, and I can safely say that Joy has a far better success rate than anyone else I've come about. So I've known Joy for about 10 years. Joy's been working in the industry now for 15 years. She knows it very well, and she's so I think she seems to be the best person to come and talk to us about all of our challenges. So Joy, we'll kick off now with, what do you see as the biggest recruitment challenge for companies at the moment?
Well, I think you covered it there. I think a very big part of the struggle is it's having the right proposition from a company's point of view. I think most people now have heard that it's all over the news. We are having record highs in terms of numbers of vacancies. August this year saw us reaching over 1 million live vacancies across the UK. And that's quite staggering in itself. But the big problem we have is that, not only is it 35% higher than it was in the quarter of, first quarter of 2020, but the reality of it is that, people have more choice now. There's far fewer people coming to the market looking for work. And when they are, it's harder to employ them because a lot of companies' proposition isn't right, and that could be anything from the way you market the job, the way you write that initial advert, your initial engagement with the candidate. If you're using a recruitment agency, it's the time that you've spent with the recruitment agency to educate them on what you're looking for. And I think the big issue we have is candidates have a lot of choice at the moment. You know, the recruitment world has flipped, and we've gone from, you know, COVID times where there was so many good candidates available through redundancies, through all sorts of, you know, changes on the market landscape, to now where the good candidates have a lot more choice. And I think this is where employers now need to up their game, because everybody's getting busier, everybody's got a high demand for recruiting staff. And the bottom line is people aren't moving the way they did a year ago.
Do you see Brexit's had an impact on the recruitment process at the moment and the challenges for companies?
I think for a lot of industries, yes. You know, obviously there are certain industries that will have been affected massively. A couple of clients that I work with were affected, and actually they had to employ more staff to cover all the compliance that you need to, you know, from an export, import, all that sort of thing. So I think there are certain job roles definitely that would have been affected. But I think the biggest thing with COVID was initially companies panicked. There was lots of redundancies, changes. Then, of course, they introduced the, you know, the furlough, the scheme to help protect employees and employers more than anything, to prevent them from making redundancies. But as a result, and as we've moved through and companies have got busier, the big challenge we have is that candidates now have more choice, and it's definitely a candidate market. And those who are trying to return to the business model they had before are really struggling to recruit staff.
So we've obviously touched on COVID as well, and COVID has had an impact on the recruitment process over the sort of last few years. And I guess from your side, it's a very changing model that you've probably seen over the last 18 months. Do you want to just explain some of the challenges that you've had and the impact that COVID has had on the recruitment side of things?
So I think initially, yes, it was a challenge. I think recruiting for a lot of companies, and for a recruiter as well, I've always built my model and my ethos is always around the relationships I build. So whether that's with a candidate or a company, I always try and meet people, because I think, you know, meeting people and working with people face to face tells a lot, and you can really unravel it's about the personality, you know, whether you're working with the client or the candidate. Once you know that person, you're far better placed to be able to support them with whatever it is that, you know, whatever, if you're recruiting or hiring. So of course the panic for me was, how am I going to meet candidates and still have the same success rate placing people if I'm not allowed to see anybody? But we were all in the same position, and companies, you know, that initial panic of everybody halting recruitment because you can't recruit staff if they can't come to the office was the initial panic. But actually, so many people have adapted, and it's, you know, because it's across the whole world, everybody's adapted at the same time. So doing a virtual interview is no longer as scary as it was at the beginning of the pandemic. Employing people who are remote working is not so scary for a lot of companies, but it's worked for the people that have been able to update and change are the ones that have seen the best benefit. So, you know, everybody's had to work from home, but they're still looking for jobs, you know, and companies are still looking to hire. So those that are comfortable with the idea of video interviewing and remote, you know, even from an induction point of view, having remote inductions, those are the sorts of companies that have really moved forward through the pandemic. And I think adopting a hybrid version of that when it comes to recruiting is really important. You know, from my point of view, for example, rather than now spending a day going out to meet candidates before their interviews, I schedule those interviews as videos, and I can still get to know somebody over a video, but I could do that at 8 o'clock at night if they've got work schedules, or I can do it first thing in the morning. I can be completely flexible, because it doesn't change the way I manage my diary. You know, people who are working from home with children don't want to be doing interviews and having to go out and about and do those interviews. So if companies are prepared to do a video interview, even if it's the first stage, it cuts down a lot of that kind of the time, you know, in the process. And I think that's one of the good things that have come out of COVID, is it's just changed people's perceptions on how you get to know others. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said, lots of challenges, but for those who are working, who are digitally ahead of the game and who are comfortable with the process, who've adopted the way they work, recruitment is fairly straightforward. It's how you recruit those people into the team is the next challenge.
Have you heard any, having spoken to employers that you work with, has anybody hinted that once the pandemic is well, I say over, but obviously restrictions are being released now, that they would prefer to go back to a face-to-face interview, or do you feel that Zoom is here to stay for that completely, or do you think that employers will maybe do a first round of interviews on Zoom and then maybe shortlist some candidates then right, you've got to come in and do face-to-face, which we couldn't do before?
I think my advice to anybody I'm working with is, if your process for recruitment, first of all, the process of recruitment has to be more efficient for anybody hiring, whatever level it is, whether you're recruiting administrator or an MD, no longer can you be doing 5 or 6 interviews and a presentation and, all of that. I think that you need to be more efficient with the way you recruit, because people are moving quickly and they have more options. But if your process included a telephone interview before, I would say 100% move that over to a video interview, because telephone interviews are restricting at the best of times. You don't get a real feel for somebody when you're just talking to them over the phone. It is very limiting. So yes, number one, I would say replace the telephone screening with video. We need people to be adaptable to working on video. So whether that means that they'll be doing it in the job or with clients in the future, you need to know that people are comfortable on screen. A lot of people aren't. I mean, the amount of times I've had to sit and literally prepare people through that video in terms of what angle the computer has to be at, what background, it's all those kind of things that I think people get scared off by. But it's important the way we're moving digitally. Companies, your meetings will go virtual surely at some point. There's, you've seen the benefits to being able to see people on screen as opposed to scheduling them in for face-to-face.
Do you see an age barrier as well? Because I know some of the interviews that we've done and meetings, and I don't want to stereotype, but generally the older people the start of the meeting does seem to take a little bit longer, doesn't it? Because they haven't quite got their heads around how the tech works, and the younger people are just on it and they know exactly what to do, and they're already
and I think that is the biggest challenge, is people are put off, whatever you say, if they're an older, younger, again, we don't want to be ageist, but there are certain people who are put off, and I hear it all the time. I hear that signal, we're doing a Microsoft Teams interview, how do you feel about it? And there's always this silence. Well, I'm computer literate is always what I get, because obviously they don't want to come across as being, a certain person, but it is daunting. The first time I did a video call, it was really daunting, and it wasn't because I was on the screen, it was because I was worried about it working. The video wasn't going to work, the sound wasn't going to work, do you wave? It's all very awkward to start with, but it is becoming the norm. So the way I do it is I say to them, right, let's jump on the screen before. We will go through it. We'll make sure that your laptop is switched on. You've got the video, you've got all the settings. You can change your background if it's not right. We can do all of that before, so that by the time you log into that video call, it's as if you've arrived on site. And I think that's the difference, is making people feel like there's no barriers to who they are. They can just be themselves in that interview. Recruitment is challenging. People don't like doing interviews. And I think anything I can do as a recruiter to help that process, be a lot more straightforward, you get more out of a person. But just coming back and tying up, I think video is definitely a great way for people to interview. And I think companies who can be flexible in terms of the way they work, fantastic. I'm still quite old school in that I think that people collaborate better in person. There's definitely something to be said for working in an office environment. And for those who are fully remote and always have been, fantastic. There are certain companies, there are certain people that work really well like that. But for the whole, most people like to be around people. You feed off people. I think, Alistair, I remember we had a conversation about it ages ago where you said somebody in the office had missed something really important because it was a conversation that would normally have been overheard, and you had forgotten to put it in an email to remind that person that wasn't in the office that day. And I think that's the challenge, is that when you're in an office environment, it's easy to build relationships with people. It's easy to learn about your colleagues. You see what people are like. When you're all remote, you almost have to check in with people, and you do lose sight of that, the reality of who we are. And that's another challenge we faced, is that some people love being remote. Others have really been affected by it. It's affected their mental health, their confidence. Some people don't even want to go out anymore. And whether we like it or not, that's going to have an impact on performance as a business. So it's got its challenges.
And then coming on leads us nicely onto business growth, because obviously without the staff, you can't grow. So what impact does recruitment have on business growth, do you think?
Well, I mean, it is very straightforward. If you haven't got people in business critical roles, it's going to impact growth. And I think that it's so, if you think about the steps that kind of are involved in it, if you've got a slot in your business that's not being covered, I mean, you know it yourself, you're really busy as a business, you've got other people having to step in to cover. It puts pressure on your already existing team, to overperform. So you've got, there's two issues there. You've got that slot that needs to be filled, that you're having a challenge to recruit for. You've got the pressure on the rest of the business who, whether they're in the office or working remotely, it's still putting that added pressure on. And from the top, you're looking at it from a very, very different view of, we need people in to perform, the business has been impacted, and it kind of, not having the right people in your team really does impact you across so many different factors.
I think we can all give some examples as well. I mean, where I've seen clients who, especially in the hospitality sector recently over the summer months, where suddenly they went from zero demand because of the lockdown to suddenly 100% demand because of the restrictions being released, and they just couldn't. And because of the perfect storm with Brexit, their normal market that they would go to go and get staff had just gone.
It's gone.
And suddenly they were left with these massive holes in their business to fill, and got to a point where they just thought, well, actually, I have the demand, but I don't have the supply, i.e. the staff. I can't now meet that demand, which is such a shame. And
when you've got restaurants who close.
Restaurants that close, Nando's being an example now. I think Nando's is still closing at 8 o'clock in the evening because it can't get the staff to do the covers needed in the evening. And so you just find, don't you, that the businesses then look at their margins and say, well, okay, where's my most profitable, especially in the hospitality sector, what's my most profitable time of the day that I'm going to make the most money? And that's the bits that are open, and the bits, the times of the day that are less busy, they'll just close up completely. I mean, I've got examples of pubs as well, where certainly more like the inns or the B&Bs, where they can't get the chambermaids in, so they're having to turn away overnight stays. Because they just can't get the bed sheets changed. Simple things like that. They can't do breakfast. I've spoken to many friends who have gone to hotels and said, "Oh, the breakfast was an absolute shambles." Yes, because the owner's doing it, because he can't get staff to.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do it.
And you're still as a consumer, you're still paying that premium to stay in that hotel. I mean, we did it a couple of months ago. We stayed in a hotel, comes with a full cooked breakfast. That breakfast was fresh fruit and boxed cereal and some yogurts, because that was all they could serve. They were short staffed. And I think, short staffed is one of them, but people's perceptions of work has changed. And what I mean by that is, you've got, for example, somebody who's worked in hospitality for many years in a GM role, for example, has suddenly realized, actually, I've got skills that would make me a good HR manager. I'm going to move out of hospitality into a completely different industry. Or you've got people who've said, I've realized that I can do this job that I'm doing part-time. I mean, during lockdown, the amount of people working part-time dropped, whereas post-lockdown, part-time workers have seen the biggest increase across, you know, in the change in recruitment. And I think it's really fair to say people previously have gone, do you know what, this is absolutely ridiculous. There's no work-life balance. The children are in breakfast clubs, after school clubs, you know, holiday clubs. People with other outside commitments have parked that all and worked it around their work. Whereas once we were forced to lock down, they realized that actually, if I can make it work for me, my performance and output is far better. So their expectation has changed. They've gone to their employers and basically said, if you can't give this to me, I will move on, because somebody down the road has recognized that I can still add value by having more flexibility. So it's been a big shift in the way people's attitude towards workers has, you know, changed, which has affected recruitment. And those companies that are not prepared to change and be more dynamic and offer more diversity are the ones that are struggling.
Which leads us nicely on to the next question, which is, what advice would you give to engaging qualifying candidates? So as an employer, thinking about making sure that it is an employee's market out there. So employers, having seen the right candidate, and now suddenly find themselves in a cat and dog chase or whatever to try and get that person, and suddenly realise that you're being conjured off against, or there's another employer wanting them.
Yeah.
So you have to keep going backwards and forwards on salaries and other things, because it's not just about
which extends the process, doesn't it, and makes it very complicated, and by which point you've lost that candidate anyway because they've had 5 other offers. So I think the biggest thing I'm saying at the moment to everybody I work with, and it's conversations I'm having with other recruiters as well, is know your proposition. So by that I mean, as an employer, know what you're offering, know what you're prepared to offer, and understand the needs of your business. So when it comes to advertising a job, you know, have you considered all of the factors in the process? It's not just about the job, it's about the impact of having that person in the role or not having that person in the role. So how does it affect your wider business? And then it goes on beyond that of, what do you look like when somebody's looking you up against 5 other competitors that they're interviewing with? How are you standing out? You know, it's not just, your competitors are no longer just within that 10-mile radius of your own business, or, you know, within your direct sector, because people are diversifying. You know, companies in Nottingham, for example, are willing to take bookkeepers or accountants or, you know, HR managers from Dorset. So suddenly these candidates have got more choice. And the first thing people look at now is flexibility. So it doesn't actually matter where the company is, they will look at flexibility as their first thing, whether that's to take the children to school in the mornings or to be able to go to a gym class at 6:30 in the evening. What is a company doing to be flexible around the needs of their employees? Culture is huge. Communication is key. I think one of the things that BKB did fantastically at the beginning of the pandemic was to consult with your employees and to understand what their challenges were, to understand what was concerning them, you know, and it's small things, you know, we want to work remotely because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, how can we make that happen? You know, understanding how you can compromise and change the way you think as a business to make sure that you keep staff. It's all very well recruiting and paying the top salary and standing out from that point of view. But if you then can't keep people, you're going to constantly be backfilling. So I think the key thing is know what you're prepared to offer. Manage your recruitment process really tightly. So if you are going to do a video interview followed by a face-to-face with a presentation, for example, make sure that you've got the staff and you have the timings right so that you're not lagging between. Because if you do a great video interview and you're on a roll, you've already moved that person into the job and you're already thinking along those lines. But in the process, that week that you've kept it between interviews, they're having 5 other meetings. They've been offered. I see it every single day where candidates are pulling out of jobs because another company offered them on the spot. And for most, when I say to them, but why did you go for that role? Because my client is offering such a good package. For them, it's they came across really well. I like their website. I've been on Companies House. They've got good records. I've been on Glassdoor. I've listened to I've read the reviews, you know, from employees, and I've seen what's going on behind the scenes. I knew somebody who worked there, or I knew somebody who knew of it. I've been on LinkedIn, And ultimately, when they sent me the offer sounded amazing. You know, people don't just want a high salary, free parking and 25 days holiday. They want anything and everything else that shows them that that company's thought about them as a person. You know, whether that is a radio in the office because it's a very quiet environment and actually it helps people concentrate, a canteen or a coffee machine that's got great coffee that you can have during the day. I've got some clients who offer breakfast, snacks during the day. What they're trying to do is encourage people back into the office. So they're changing the way the environment is in the office and saying to people, we understand you want to work from home on a Monday and a Friday. That's great. But what we're offering you in the office is that culture, that support, the nurturing environment, a collaborative way of working. All those things are hugely important to people now. It's not just what you can offer, you know.
So the changes, obviously, there are changes that need to be made that employers need to do to support their recruitment process. And you've touched on those already with obviously the hybrid, the working and listening to employees' demands. What about the changes that obviously people need to make and how they go about publicising all of that as well? Because obviously it's all very well making the changes, but you need to make the changes to support your continual recruitment process.
Yep.
And so how can employers manage that, do you think, and can bang on about it so people actually take notice of it? And
I think a lot of companies that I'm seeing, for example, on social media, are now starting to shout about the great things that they're doing as a company. You know, they are promoting, whether it's been an event they've been involved in or a podcast that they're doing, they're now showing that they're out there and they're actually ahead of the curve in terms of, you know, if you are an accountant, for example, the perception of accountants are they're great when you need support from the figures, but they're not very, they're not dynamic, they're not out there, they're not, you know, up with the times, they're not innovative and outgoing. BKB are doing a great job of shouting about what you're doing, understanding what the challenges are that your clients are facing that will impact the relationships you have with them. So you're doing so much more socially to kind of enhance your brand, but to also show that you are thinking outside of the box. People will look at that. Whenever I'm prepping somebody for an interview, I no longer say to them, spend hours on the internet making sure you know about the company. My clients don't care if the potential candidates come in and know exactly what month they were founded or how many employees they've got. They want to know, the employer wants to know that they've taken the time to get to know that company and they understand what's expected in the brief. But on the same token, you've got candidates now who are going onto LinkedIn, they're looking up the CEO, they're looking up those people in the team and understanding, building a picture before they've interviewed of who the company are. So if you've got a brand that nobody in your business is on LinkedIn, or there's no social media presence, or there's no interesting articles on your website, or your recruitment page on your website just says apply, we've got loads going on, apply, you're not going to get the interest. You know, you've just got to tweak the way you look on social media. If you think about how we shop pre-COVID, you know, as opposed to online, when you walk into a shop, if you don't immediately see something that you like, you start browsing, you've switched off, you're not actively shopping. And you'll probably end up walking out. Maybe you'll buy something small, but you'll walk out. If you go in and the aesthetics are great, it looks great, the people working there have got a smile on their face and they actually engage with you and there's something about it, you will buy something. You probably end up spending more than you would have as well. So I think it is change. You make sure that your online presence, if you have a presence, is great. When you make an offer to somebody, no longer can you just drop them an email and say, welcome to the team, here's your salary, this is what will be expected of you, please sign the attached contract and let us know when you can start. People want to be engaged from the onset. So a very quick example is I've got a client who creates a culture deck for their employees. So when they send out an offer letter, it comes with a culture deck, which it's very simple, but it highlights who they are. And it says things like, we give you free food for breakfast and snacks. Sometimes they're healthy, you know, or we have a ping pong table, or we're social, we close at Christmas, and highlighting all the small benefits, but they've done it in such a way that people look at it and go, wow, it's really, they're engaging me. And I love the way they look after their staff. That seems to be the most important thing. And that's what I'm saying about knowing what you're advertising.
I think that, I mean, it comes on, doesn't it, to build an employer brand. I mean, a lot of businesses focus on building their brand with their customers, and they overlook the fact that they also need to build a brand with their employees as well, and prospective employees. And certainly when it comes to building an employer brand, I mean, we do quite a few valuations for companies, and we try, for various reasons, we have to agree that with HMRC. One of the things that we've noticed over the last couple of years is that the valuations of businesses is so dependent on staff numbers, because if you don't have any, if you're not employing anybody and you're trying to build a business either through yourself as a husband and wife or subcontracting, that HMRC will just come back and say there's no value to your business here, because you don't have any. And they're quite right, because how can you, if you're going to do succession planning, which obviously is something that Luke and I work with our clients and try and get people to think about, what's your succession plan, especially when you start getting into your late 30s, 40s, you've got to thinking to yourself, what's going to be, what's my exit strategy in 10, 15 years time here? And you can't sell a business, you can't exit a business and it still succeed if you don't have any employees there to take on that mantle.
Yeah.
And I think building an employer brand is certainly something that has come to focus, I think, with businesses in the last 18 months. And now we are seeing this, and people are fighting for employees. And so that employer brand is so important, and it's important because it affects your ability to trade now. It affects your ability to trade in the future. It adds value if you can get everybody on the same page, and obviously the bigger you become, the harder that is. So it's making sure, isn't it, that you're creating a brand that everyone can buy into, and not just your customers, but also your staff. And they say if your staff can look after your customers, then all you need to do is look after your staff.
And I think that's the thing that COVID has taught everybody, and companies who are struggling now are the ones that are fighting to go back. We want to go back to being in control. I'm in control of the interview process. I have the job. You want the job that I've got, so you need to meet my demands. And it's completely changed. And I think the companies who are being successful are the ones that are going, okay, what do we really want? How does that impact our staff? Do we know our staff? You know, it's all very well recruiting somebody into the team, but Joe Bloggs, who's going to train them, is already interviewed for 5 other jobs because they've already got their exit strategy. So it starts with knowing your team, making sure your culture is embedded, it's aligned with everybody's values, you're all working together. You know, when it comes to recruiting, ask your team what they're looking for, right? We need to bring on a new head of marketing. Where's the support? Who needs what? How is that going to affect Tom downstairs who's looking to move up with his career? How can we make sure we keep him, but we still bring somebody in? So it's marrying all of it together. It sounds straightforward when you kind of chat about it, but actually it's a big process. And this is why I think a lot of recruitment agencies are taken for granted. We've always just been the person at the other end who just sifts through CVs. Yep, they've keyworded all the correct, yep, their reasons for leaving all stack up. Great, we'll forward them on. The difference is when you actually get into it, the process for me is really, really detailed. I understand my client. I help them build their brand in terms of what are they offering my candidates. How can I sell that when I know that salary-wise, this job is paying a lot less than another role that I've got on, but actually this company has got the brand. They are the ones that are going to look after my employee. I can see that employee developing in 5 years' time because they've got their structure, their proposition is on point. You know, my candidates would probably go for the 25, 30 grand opposed to the 22, 23. But once I educate them on, this is the one that you want, because this is where you're going to see yourself. You've told me you want progression. This is what's going to happen. This role might pay you more, but this is what your limitations are. So I work very closely with both the candidates and the clients to make sure that we're matching the right people. But it's no good. I can place the best people with these companies. If your proposition, if your brand, your culture, if that's not right, it doesn't matter. They will end up leaving, or you'll lose 3 other people in the process.
Yeah, and I think you've touched, I mean, the last question is what are you doing to support companies who are struggling with recruitment? And certainly I've seen that when you've helped us and we've come to you and said, well, we're looking for a bookkeeper or a qualified accountant. And there's almost a challenge coming back our way, which is always like, well, okay, but what are you going to do this? How are you going to manage that? What do I say to your prospective candidates? And it's not just about salary. And what I always find with you, Joy, is that you always give us advice and support in that initial meeting. And I assume you do that for other people as well. And we're not just
yeah. And I mean, you know, I don't take on a job so that I can hit my stats. I'm targeted to place people into jobs. That's my own, you know, my success is based on filling positions. But equally, and if we look at our relationship, Alistair, I hope you don't mind me saying, but when we first started working together, your interview process you thought was brilliant, because you thought we're very real, we're very honest, this is who we are, we like you, let's offer you a job. We learned the hard way that actually that wasn't good enough for the candidates, and you thought you were doing the right thing by being very informal, very relaxed in your approach, but actually people like detail. You know, they want to hear what's good about your company. They want you to sell the business to them. You know that your company is great. And, you know, well, we've got a great online presence. People know us. We don't have to do sales because we've got referrals coming through the door. So we know we're a great company. But you've got to put yourself into that candidate's shoes. Now you're thinking they've got 3 other companies that are selling the dream to this company. How are we going to stand out? So, you know, we work together to make sure when you're interviewing, you ask a certain amount of questions, you give them the opportunity to sell themselves, you sell the company, and you still have it very relaxed and informal, but there's a lot more detail that goes into it. And I think you know what I mean. It's very difficult to, oh, we love them, they would be perfect for us, let's get them in. But now you haven't sold that to them. We know it's right. You and I understand this person will be perfect for the company, but how are we going to get them over the line? How are you going to do it? And that's what you've had to work on. Yeah,
I think it's fairly safe to say that we've, in the 10 years that I've known you, Joy, I think we've changed a lot in that 10 years. And I think we've grown up as well, because you've helped us identify what the challenges are, employers and employees. So it's understanding the employees' challenges as well, and also just making them welcome when they do come for, if they do come for face-to-face interview, not a Zoom meeting, is actually trying to understand their process from day one. Think, okay, well, where are they going? What time is there parking? Is that sort of thing? It's like treating them like a new client. How would you put them in your shoes? They know they've never been to your offices before. To the point, when they turn up, do they ring a doorbell? Do they just walk in the door? Who do they see? What's the first person they see? Are they offered a drink, or are they left to their own devices, standing around, with nothing?
And I think that's all those things are. That's what I do for my clients. So I know when candidates turn up to interview with BKB, they will ring a buzzer. There's no formal reception. They will then they will walk into the main foyer. Somebody will come and greet them. This is where they'll go. By that stage, it's almost like they're going, oh, yeah, that was it. Okay, I expected that. That's great. Now I'm sitting down. So-and-so is going to come and offer me a coffee. That's fantastic. And then I'll meet Alistair. It's taken that nerve out of the process, because I've sold that to them. I've prepared them. I've helped them understand what they're going to be expecting. And then I've worked with you to say, look, this person is nervous, or this person's experience is X, Y, and Z, perhaps consider this, or they're not quite right because of that. We've talked it through so you understand, who you're meeting as well. But the other thing is you have to be more prepared. I'm saying to my clients, go and look at this person on LinkedIn, make sure you like the look of them, you kind of understand who they are, as well as them doing that. So by the time you meet, you've taken out all of those unnecessary nerves, and you can just get to know each other. You know, my role in the process is to understand my client, know know what color the chairs are in their office and what the dress code is. I mean, I've got a client who is so casual in the way they work. If a candidate turned up in a full pinstripe suit, they would immediately feel out of place. Nobody ever shows up in a pinstripe suit, because I make it that clear, you know. And I think my job is to help navigate you through the process. Hopefully you see a selection of candidates that are right, but I also understand what's going on in their personal life, how many other interviews they've got going on, where else you know, who else are they seeing, what jobs they're applying for. And it starts to make you understand what they're attracted to. So I can say to you, Alistair, this person has 3 other interviews. Yours is their favorite because of X, Y, and Z. We really need to sell that in the interview. You need to act quickly. When are we second interviewing? Who's making the offer? You know, what does your offer letter look like? It's those things that you can change and you can tweak and manage to help you get the people that you want through the door. We've got to act quickly, we've got to be on point, and we've got to make them feel like your company stands out when they're comparing it to 3 others.
I think, in summary, we've reaching the end of the podcast now, but I think in summary, it's a case of employers engaging with their recruiters, and everyone understanding each other's page, and also the pains that employees and employers are having. So I think ultimately it's your company name is Collaborate Limited, and it's very aptly titled, may I say, because it's all about collaboration, isn't it?
It really is.
All parties. So
yeah.
Luke, do you want to?
Yes, I just want to say thank you, Joy, for your time. And if this podcast has given you any sort of important questions or anything you want to ask of either BKB or Collaborate, then feel free to get in touch, and we can take up further on any points you want to discuss. Be more than happy to. So thank you from Ali and myself, Joy, for coming on board and doing this with us.
No problem. Can I just say, to finalise, I am actually running a seminar, face-to-face event in Bournemouth on the 14th of October, where I am collaborating, funnily enough, with an employment solicitor and an HR expert. And we're going to be delivering an interactive seminar on the challenges of legal HR recruitment from the standpoint that we're in at the moment. So if there is anybody who is interested in that, I'll be posting the link via my LinkedIn. Please do keep an eye out.
I think I'll go myself, Joy.
I'll hold you to that, Alistair. There's coffee and pastry.
Oh, well, you've won me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
No, thank you very much, Joy. Thank you.
No worries. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you.